Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is about the difference between the old AFR Enforcer for a small block Chevy and their new AFR Enforcer head for a small block Chevy. I'll show you the flow numbers, we'll talk about some of the differences, it's easy to spot, and things like that. So this maybe seem like, does this seem like deja vu? Didn't you do this video? I did, but I removed it about a month ago. And the reason why is because AFR wanted me to include other details about the head, their new one, that I had left off. So hence I removed that one, and it took a while. Here we are, take two essentially, but that's what it's going to be. So if you're unfamiliar with AFR, I'm surprised, but AFR is mostly known, at least it has been for me for a long time. They're probably one of the more budget-oriented full CNC heads you can get, whether it be LS, small block Ford, small block Chevy, big block Chevy. That's what they're probably most known for. They by far have the cheapest full CNC heads that are out there for anything. But these are as cast heads. So a little lesson for you, or history for you from this. AFR doesn't cast their own heads. Back in the time when a long time ago, they actually did, but then they end up using a different manufacturer in America to cast their heads. That manufacturer then kind of went away, and they had to look for another manufacturer, and they happened to find one that's overseas. They also found another one in America. So foundries, for the record, in America is a little bit harder to find. I'll straight up say that. But they found one in America and one over in China to cast their heads. So some are cast in one facility and some are cast in the other. But anyway, they had seen a large trend going on as far as shopping, that people really wanted something more budget oriented. So even as far as their CNC heads, which are very budget oriented for a full CNC head, they knew that the demand was there definitely for an as cast head that would be cheaper for people, so it'd be more affordable. So as they had their new, their place that was casting their heads in China, that supplier said, you know, we have an as cast head that we would like to sell to you. And AFR was like, that would fit their mold. And they were like, well, that fits great because we're looking for a budget oriented head for the budget guys that's an as cast head. Because a lot of guys were getting heads, you know, from everywhere else that were made in China, and they'd had Chinese parts and they just weren't that good. So AFR thought, you know what? The casting itself's great. If we put our own parts in this, it'd be an excellent budget head for the budget-friendly guy, and it should make some power. So that's what they did. They got this from their supplier, so they did not send a casting over to or any development over to have this first one, their old style, developed. Their supplier just happened to have that. So this whole thing was done by their supplier as far as the design part of it. What AFR did was, hey, we'll just put our own stuff in it. So this was the difference between the Enforcer and the Eliminator being their full CNC one. If you get their Enforcer like this one, this is the old version, all the machine work, every single bit of it, from the valve job, valve guide sizing, the final milling, all the machine work is done overseas. But AFR does all the assembly. They put the same valves that are in this head is in their full CNC head. Same valve springs, the entire other parts. So all the good parts are in this. And that's what AFR is really trying to focus on, because if you know, like I said, a lot of people were looking for a budget head, but also they were getting these budget heads that just didn't have really good parts. They had solved that. And that was the head that they were selling. But this one head, this old Enforcer, might look really, really familiar to you. This is their new one. This one looks a lot like what they have. So for a time now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus just on the old one to show you why it is what it is, and then we'll show you the difference in the new one and how it's varied. Because this one, if you do enough of the small block Chevy world, you'd notice that this old Enforcer looks very similar to others. So let me bring out some other heads and kind of show you why it might look similar to others. And then we'll talk about why they switched to this. So this is the old AFR 195 Enforcer head. Again, this was supplied from from AFR's supplier in China that cast their heads. AFR had nothing to do with this design. It was just offered by their supplier. But whoever sent this, or whoever did set this head up, you'll notice that this head looks familiar, because the reason why is this is a copy or an imitation of this head. This is a Dart Pro 1 200cc Platinum. Now obviously I ported this, the only reason why I even have this one here. But if you notice, like, look at the ports on the water, it's a copy of this head. So imitation, allegedly, and that created that head. So this old AFR Enforcer was essentially an Chinese imitation of the Dart Pro 1 200cc platinum head. And if you think it was weird that AFR was selling a knockoff of a Dart head, oddly enough, Dart sells a knockoff of the AFR head currently. It's called something else, allegedly. But anyway, so this head is very similar because of that to this head. But this gets where things get really, really tricky. This head is also, even though this is the Enforcer one, AFR, I'm going to pull up two other examples that look very, very similar, but aren't the AFR Enforcer. Okay, all these heads here are essentially the same heads. So again, this is the AFR Enforcer. Now, AFR's difference between all the rest, and this is big because I told you that they use their parts. If you're unaware of this, AFR uses 8mm stuff in all of what they do, except for the big blocks. So the small block line, all 8mm stuff. So when they had their supplier do this head for them, they said, you need to put in 8mm guides because we use 8mm hardware in all of our stuff. And just to keep it for them from having to buy multiple valves for just one head, they had everything switched over to 8mm stuff. So all the AFR Enforcers take 8mm valves. And this 195 took a 202 intake valve and a 1600 exhaust valve. And they only offered it in angle plug, I believe. But anyway, every one of these other heads are almost identical, with the biggest difference being the valve. They're 8mm from AFR. These other ones are 11/32. So here, watch this. This is the AFR Enforcer. This is one of the ones I get because this is the start for my CNC program. If you watched the video back, the Automotive Adventures with Austin and the Bob McVeigh video, you will know we dynoed a 406 small block Chevy and it used Jegs heads. Guess what? The Jegs heads is pretty much this head, but it doesn't say Jegs on it. And by the way, that head is pretty much this head, the old AFR Enforcer. The difference, the big difference, these have 11/32 valves. So none of the other ones you will find will have the 8mm stuff, only the AFR. This, look, they look identical because the valve job is done in the same place. Valve job seat material is done in the same place, identical. This is the same head. I can't tell you who sells this one because I get it from my wholesaler and you have to have a wholesale account to get it. But I am 100% positive it's sold in many forms. Many forms. So, matter of fact, the K&J Assault head was about the same head. Looks almost identical. Currently, they're out of the angle plugs. And there's many other ones. But that's not the only one because there's a slight difference when you go to this one. Because if you look, those look the same as this one, except for some small differences. So this one, I can tell you where it came from because a customer sent this one in for me to put my port program on, which will be the last one. This one, you guys might know, it comes from eBay or Amazon. This is the DNA head. And this one I have done a video on long ago, but this is the DNA head. And if you notice, the outsides all look the same. Ports look pretty close to the same. Oh, but there is the difference. If you notice the AFR Enforcer and this one that I get, they're the same until you get to here. And this is the difference. The casting looks virtually identical. The biggest thing I could tell is this one was probably made from a different foundry in China than these two. But as far as the actual casting, it's the design, it's relatively close. The big difference on this one is the DNA uses, and you can kind of tell, it looks like a copper color. These are from the AFR Enforcer, and the one I use, it's a more shinier, it's a ductile iron. These are some copper alloy. I hate machining these. They are way too hard. The other thing is you could tell this is done in a different factory because look, it's got more casting flash. And if you even look at the ports, look at that. Look at this one. And look at the AFR Enforcers, much cleaner. These two are the Enforcer and the one I use, much cleaner than this DNA one. So it's probably cast in a different place because they definitely put in different seats. But essentially, that head is the same. Now, the one that Jegs gets is also essentially the same, except for it's got a big old hole right here where they use to locate it on the machine. So pretty much what I'm trying to tell you is this head, the same one that AFR used, the old Enforcer, is sold under so many different labels. The only difference being is the AFR one had an 8mm guide in there, so you could use 8mm valve train. The rest of them were essentially the same. Most of them were cast in the same place, some cast in different places with small changes, nothing dramatic. The good news, by the way, just so you guys know, and the reason why I have this one here, this is my CNC program for it. So I do try to sell a little bit here. I end up taking them from the 195 that they have here. So if you have the old Enforcer, it looks like this, or if you're able to get one of these, or this one, because the DNA head's about ready to be cut to that, I have a CNC program that does it like that. It makes them into a nice CNC, 227 cc's. This made $595 on a hydraulic roller 406 and made $625 on a hydraulic roller 427. Both of them were pump gas and like 10-to-1. But anyway, all of these heads, that's a benefit to this, can be made into that, which is awesome. But these are the old ones. So if you get what I'm trying to say, and it seemed like I got a little off track here, point I'm trying to make is AFR knew this. So their supplier supplied this head. They were all for it. They're making money. But they also kind of understood, hey, this is kind of an issue. One, we're selling pretty much a knockoff of Dart, allegedly, and we'd like to have our own design in it. And not to mention, everybody and their dog has the same head. So we need to have our own head. So that's why they created the new AFR Enforcer, which is this one. This is their new AFR Enforcer head. And I probably need to tell you a little bit of things before I get too far into this. Here's something you need to remember, because right now I know some of the people in the comments are probably thinking, well, this Chinese casting, it's not that good. Here's what you need to remember. Even with the old AFR Enforcer head and this new one that they have, even though it's cast in China, AFR offers a lifetime warranty on their castings. So if you're worried about that, AFR at least puts a warranty behind that part, which is really, really great. Now, I think they have like a 2-year on parts though. Something else to think about, the biggest difference between the Enforcer, these, and their Eliminator is these are all machined in China. So from the valve job, the guides, all of it completely machined in China. All AFR does is assemble them. The reason why the Eliminators cost so much is because some of them are cast over in China, but the difference is when they are cast in China, that's all that they've done. So you can go back, watch the tour that I had of AFR, but when they get their heads from China, like for their Eliminators, there's nothing done, as in not a single hole, not a head bolt hole, not a guide hole, not a spark plug hole, none of it. They're pretty much just poured there. Once they get there to AFR in California, all the machine work is done, the seats are installed, the guides are installed, the valve job's done, all that's done, CNC porting, all done in America. And that's the reason why those are more expensive. Only the Enforcers are done, all the machine work's done overseas. Assembly done here with the parts that they use. So anyway, to this head. So if you look at this new one, this is their 200cc Enforcer head versus what they called the 195 from past. And for the record, AFR was nice enough a couple years ago to send me a set of these just to use for dyno testing on my small block Chevy dyno mule. You can go back and watch those. So if you're worried about the durability of that head anyway, I think we had over 130 something dyno runs with this Enforcer head. And in the end, we end up putting that head on the 350 small block Chevy that I tried blowing up with the blower. And this is a stock block, stock crank, stock rods, 350. And we put a supercharger on it with these heads with the goal of trying to break the engine. And it made 1,052 and stayed together. And I just maxed out the blower. But those heads are plenty tough. So don't get anything wrong with that. But the new ones are just as strong, if not stronger. So these ones are completely different because AFR had nothing to do with the design on the old one. So what AFR did said, hey, let's just start with a clean slate. We can send this over to have them cast in our own way, the way we want them, from the water cores to the intake ports. Everything will be designed the way we want them to be. And this is what they came up with. Now this may look similar to some of you. It may look similar to their 195 heads, which it's similar, but not identical. So if you look at the AFR 195 Eliminator head, that's a fantastic head. This looks very, very similar. Their street version, at least, it looks like. but there's some differences which I'll get to. So first off, these have, I think they said they have a 69 cc chamber, so it's a little bit larger than what these ones. When I CC these were 66, but I believe these are 69. I could be wrong. I need to go back and check that. If there is, I'll put a note here at the bottom. You'll just read it on the page. But anyway, here's the thing though, the intake valve changed. So before this was a 202 intake valve, we now have a 205 intake valve. The exhaust valve stayed the same at 1.6. But here's a bigger thing. Speaking of valve jobs, this is their own valve job. So if you noticed, this is the old one. It has a generic 3-angle, not the greatest. This one, their new ones, that's their valve job profile that they gave that factory. And it's a much better valve job, much better profile. The thing looks really, really good. Same with the exhaust, a little bit different than what they were doing before. But that's their AFR's own particular valve job, way different from what this one was. So excellent there. The whole chamber design itself, like I said, this looks exactly like what you'd see in their eliminator heads. That's way different than this. So much more improved. But let me flip around some other views and we'll do comparisons that way. Here's the intake view of this new AFR Enforcer head. And again, this looks a lot like your 195 eliminator heads. Very, very similar. You have on the street version, you have the small exhaust crossover, and then you got your ports. Again, these are 200 cc ports, which are a little bit larger than what you had on these ones before, which were 195. Now here's one of probably the bigger changes. This old Enforcer, as you know, had 2 bolt patterns. You have your traditional, which there's way more manifolds available for, and then the Vortec ones. The Vortec pattern has now been eliminated, because in all fairness, not very many people run that Vortec pattern anyway. It's pretty rare. If you're wondering about the intake port, like what gasket better works with that, this closely lines up to a 1205. Not exactly, but it's really close. This one was a little bit undersized, the old one. But as you can tell, all nice stuff. This looks exactly like you would see another AFR head. If I had another one here, I'd show it like an eliminator to show you a comparison. But this is definitely different. So great, looks similar as opposed to what this looked before. So, but let me show you the exhaust view now. This is the exhaust view, and again, this looks just like any other AFR eliminator head. And this is a key giveaway. You're like, how do I know if I got the old or new? Well, this is the old one. As you notice, it's milled all the way across flat, but here's the big giveaway. They now come cast with an AFR logo in them. They never did that before. The other thing is their angle plugs. They are the L98 plug angle, which is the same one that they have on all their eliminator stuff, which is great. And it seems like it works very well. But this is a dead giveaway that it's the newer version. Just look at the exhaust flange. Easy to spot. But looking at all this, you definitely have a larger exhaust port. This actually seems pretty large. We're going to show the flow numbers, and I'll show you the differerences in those as well. In case you're wondering what the outside looks like, as you can tell, that looks like a new, like an AFR eliminator head. This whole block here looks exactly like it, as opposed to that's how it looked before. So easy to spot. By the way, if you try buying them now, chances are you're probably just going to get the new 200 one anyway. So let's look at the flow numbers. Okay, here are the flow numbers. I'm going to say these out loud for you guys that are, truck drivers and maybe got the video going and you just need to hear it. But we'll go through each of them with them. So both of them were flowed on a 4030 bore, which I figure if most people are probably going to put these on a maybe 350, 383, something like that. So that's the bore that was flowed on, 4030, both the same way. No exhaust pipe, I just don't flow with exhaust pipes. So I'm not going to hit every number, but I'll hit the most important. You feel free to pause it and look at it if you want to, though. But anyway, this is the old Enforcer. So the number I really care about is the 400 number. That's I think it's the gold number. To me, if you have a good head, that needs to flow great there. The old Enforcer flowed 224. That's out of the box, just exactly how they come. Now this new Enforcer goes 237, so about a 13 CFM gain. Not bad at all for there, right? At 500, the old one went 248, and the new one goes 263. Heck of a gain. Good job there. Now at 600, keep hitting this with my cable. The old one went 265. At 600 on this, it actually backs up on the new one. The new one backs up to 253. So pretty much, and I'll go ahead and tell you just looking at this, from 1 to 5, the new Enforcer outflows the old Enforcer. But here's the thing. At 700 valve lift, the old Enforcer goes 259. The new one goes 255. So from 600 on, the old Enforcer beats the new Enforcer. Chances are, though, in all fairness, you're probably running a hydraulic roller cam because that's how they come assembled. So you're probably never going to get there. But if you choose to switch to a solid roller, which I did dyno test the old Enforcers with the solid roller, that might be important. But let's look at the exhaust side now. So we'll look at the 400 number first. The old one went 157.7. The new one at 400 goes 174 almost. That's a huge, huge gain. 500, the old one went 177. The new one goes 195. Big gain there. 600, the old one went 191. The new one goes, let's see, 195. Kind of peters at 195. But overall on the exhaust side, except for very peaks, because if you look at the peak side, so after 600 or after 700 on the old Enforcer, it's better. The newer Enforcer is better at the lower lifts. So something to keep in mind. So yeah, it looks better at the higher lifts on the old Enforcer, but you're probably not going to get there with a hydraulic roller cam. Anyway, I have two benches, as you guys might know, the Science Digital 680 and my Superflow 750. I floated on both. So let's go ahead and look at those flow numbers too. Same bore, floating the same way. The Superflow typically reads higher. I'm just going to hit the highlights on this one. Old one, old Enforcer, 230 at 4 on the intake side. New one, 239, 9 CFM gain. 500 valve lift on the intake, 255 on the old one. New one, 264. Old one at 600, 262. New one, 258. So again, almost the same numbers, repeats pretty close to what the other bench did. Still showing the same thing. The new Enforcer is much better in the lower lifts and not quite as good in the upper lifts. But let's look at the exhaust. 400, the old one, 160. New one, 175, huge gain. Old one at 500 goes 177. New one, 191. 600, the old one went 189. New one, 194. And it peaks at, the old one peaked at 203. This one peaks at 199. So the same situation. Better at new AFR Enforcer, better at the low lift flows. This is only better at the peak, which most of you probably will not see. But anyway, you're like, well, that's great and all that, man. I appreciate everything you do. Thanks for giving me the numbers, but what does it really do on the dyno? Because that's really what we care about. Well, I know AFR has done back-to-back dyno tests with these, and I know that they have videos out on that. I would like to, and maybe if you guys put enough pressure on AFR, it can happen. I would like to dyno test the two because I have done a ton of testing with this old AFR Enforcer because, like I said, AFR was nice enough to donate a set for me to use in my 406 dyno mill that we used forever. So 26 different manifolds, whole bunch of different carburetors. It was a lot of blast with this. I think the best it ever made was 570 with these, and that's a solid roller cam, 11.2 compression ratio. So pump gas, 406, just solid roller. However, currently I have a 406 dyno mill, but it's way too much for what these heads should be. But I do have this. This is the 383, which you guys might remember. This is a Smeding short block. And right now, currently, it's got, you guessed it, double hump heads on it. This made 470. It's got an AFR intake on it too, dual plane. But anyway, it would be great to test the two heads on that because that one's a hydraulic roller. It should be about a 600 lift. It's a nice Daniel Powell hydraulic roller cam. An excellent test, and maybe if you put pressure on AFR, this would happen. I could get another head, because they sent me this one obviously to flow and this one to flow. If I got another one of each one of them, I could dyno test them back to back and we could see. But they may not be interested in that either too. Because it's not like they haven't got a whole bunch of other engine shops that have already done this for them. So it'd just be another one, but probably to them it feels like a waste, which I get. But anyway, eventually, regardless, I think it's just a matter of time anyway, whether they send heads or not, that this will get done. I will do a back-to-back on those. and I'll get to see how much power difference there actually is to be able to share that with you. Because I'm positive that this new one is better. I'm positive. I mean, it's looking really good. It's got a better design and stuff. It looks really much better than the old one. Not that this one didn't make plenty of power, but I do think this is going to make more, especially in the street applications type stuff. You might be asking yourself, was this the same head as the AFR 195 Eliminator, just as cast? No. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the biggest difference, the short side height, which hopefully you can see there. See that? That's actually really short. The 195 actually has a taller short side, the CNC one. So this has definitely got a different port height as far as the short side, and that makes it different. I did port one of these for a customer, and I think I put a video out, I can't remember. They end up going 290, which he is just a street application, so it works out really, really well, but they end up turning out pretty good. However, in all fairness, I know I can port this to make it flow more. I haven't really pushed that because that limitation really for porting wise is that short side's too, it doesn't give me a lot of room to work with because it's short anyway. So making it shorter, or making it, really it needs to be this height after porting with a certain dimensions, and it's already gone, so it's hard to make it what I want. I wish it was actually a little taller anyway to make it the shape I want. But it still turns out really, really nice anyway, so it's a really, really good head. Again, I've got a CNC program for this old Enforcer. I do not have one for that. So if you happen to have the old Enforcer or the DNA heads or any of those, feel free to email me at winegunnerracing@gmail.com, and I'll tell you about the pricing on the CNC program for that. But eventually we'll get test posts of them. If there's some other information you would like to know about these heads, put it in the comments. Like, ask the question there, I'll answer there. Please don't call me to ask me questions about this. I am trying to work with customer stuff. You could also email me at winegunnerracing@gmail.com to ask questions. Sometimes it takes time because, again, I'm dealing with customer stuff. But if there's some kind of piece of information that I've either left off or incorrectly did, feel free to tell me in the comments. But understand this, I did not intentionally leave off anything to make something look better or worse. If I did, it's purely by accident. But both are very good heads. Now you have a better idea what's going on with them. By the way, I do like this, and I mentioned this in the first time I did the video. Most AFR heads have a captured hole like that. See that? I hate that with a passion. So I'm so much happier that they did things like this, where it's open like this. You might say, why does it make a difference? You and many of you out there will probably understand this. Sometimes we actually have to grind a little bit of this just to get the push rod just right for a rocker tip alignment, just right. When you've got a hole like that, it's more of a pain, one. And two, if you happen to, which is the worst case scenario, it breaks through and bubbles here. When it's open like this, people can get in with their welder a lot easier and weld that up, and you can grind it much better as opposed to that. And if you think sleeves are the answer, ooh, not really. So thank you for that. I'm so much happier that way. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman. Hopefully you guys got something out of this video. I do make plenty of mistakes. That's why I'm saying I'm no Superman. I did race Superboy. I do not port cast iron heads. I will never respond to a Facebook or Instagram message. The best way to get a hold of me is through email, winegunnerracing@gmail.com. You guys take care.